have another video that we want to show you this morning from something that took place last night with our family in DC. And so just pay attention to the screen before we kick into the message. Emily and I have been married now for 11 years. We have 5 children.
Dryden, Soleil, and then we went to China and adopted Mackenzie and Lily. And then 1 year ago, went back to China to adopt our first son, Thaddeus. Lily was born in China. Her heart was actually upside down backwards and on the right-hand side of her chest. Hundreds of families had reviewed her medical file and had it reviewed by cardiologist after cardiologist, and none of them gave them any hope. They basically said, China is correct, this child is terminal. We recommend you don't bring her here because you're going to fall in love with this child, bring her here, and she's going to die. And so the very thing that had most families running away from Lily is what had us running towards her, because we believe that no matter what, there's always hope. And so our family has always chose hope.
It's one experience after another where her body was just rejecting all of the things that they were doing to try to help her. And so that is what launched us into, I would say, 2 years of medical frustration and confusion.
Basically, they told us there's nothing else that we can do for her. There's no other surgeries, we're out of options. We started pushing to see if they would consider listing her for a heart transplant. We weren't expecting the phone call to come. I'll never forget. I broke down. I was so excited that Lily was finally gonna have the chance to know what it means to run, to play, to be a normal child. We heard the chopper blades. I think that's a sound I'll never forget. And so Lily had a new heart. We've always referred to her new heart as her hero's heart, because we believe that this little child that ended up passing away was able to give our daughter new life. And I can't think of any greater example of a hero than that.
Me.
Lily?
All right, Lils.
She's doing awesome. She is reading, she's writing, she's making friends.
Whoa,
Wow.
Lily's dream is that she wanted to run. We did the Race for Every Child, and Lily completed her very first 5K race.
So what do you get to do now that you have a new heart?
Play and run.
You get to play and run? You don't run races though, do you? You don't run races. What?
5K.
You ran a 5K? When you live through something that we've lived through and we've seen what we've seen with Lily and the impact of an organization like the American Heart Association, and we see it all now live and in color as our little girl runs across the room, is unbelievable.
With the medical advances that have taken place with the American Heart Association, all of the research that is done, they had hope. They thought that, yes, I think we can help this little girl. Because of that, Lily Grace is here today. I'll address the video in a moment, and I'll explain it to you just a little bit, because we're in the middle of this series called His Story, in which in this series what we're doing is we're kind of hitting the highlight reel moments that took place in Israel's history from the fall of mankind all the way to the cross, which we're going to talk about on Easter. And so we're going to talk about those events that took place that in redemptive history was God enacting his plan to rescue us, his kids. And last week Jeff talked about the fall of mankind, and today we're going to talk about a guy named Abraham and a promise that was made in Genesis chapter 12. But at the Heart Ball last night, we were invited, our family, we were the guests of honor. And the American Heart Association actually named Lily for 2016 the face of the American Heart Association. And so, yes, absolutely. And so we were invited there last night was their marquee event in this area. It's a massive fundraiser where they're trying to raise millions of dollars to fund research and to get physicians the tools that they need so that kids like Lily can have a chance at a normal life. And so we're sitting there, and they play the video, and I had the opportunity to get up and share and speak a little bit. It was very overwhelming to us. But even sitting there last night and the week leading up to this, I couldn't help but think that no matter how much money is raised. No matter how much medical equipment we have, no matter how great the skill of our surgeons and our physicians and our doctor, no matter what we do in our research, we can never, ever reverse the effects of the fall, of what happened in the garden. And what that means for Lily is this. Lily's running around now, she's in kindergarten, she's having a blast, but that heart that's in her body has a shelf life. It may be 4 years, it may be 6, probably no more than 10, and in a very few years, probably she'll be laying on a hospital bed again, and we'll be praying that this child can find a new heart. And little Thaddeus, who's running around like crazy, and he's making friends, and he's growing, and he's doing incredible, and you look at that, and he looks like he's a healthy little boy who's just like every other kid out there, but the doctors have told us that at this point in his life, there's nothing they can do for him. So does he have a year, 2 years? We don't know. We don't know. Because no matter what we can do medically in this country, we cannot reverse the effects of the fall. And that does not just speak towards these medically ill children like Lily and Thad. That's for you and I. And so this series is a chance for us to look at God's plan to rescue his kids from the effects of the fall. Will you pray with me this morning? May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So in other words, and I'm so glad you're here, but let's think about this for a moment. The moment, and Jeff talked about this last week, the moment sin entered the world, what happened was it triggered a series of events by God, a plan that God put in place to rescue us, his kids. And so kind of how it worked is very early on in this rescue plan, God would raise up key leaders to play an important role in his salvation plan. Guys like Moses and David and Elijah, people that you've heard of, God would raise up these leaders to take part in his redemption plan. And the first key individual in this plan was a guy named Abraham. By the way, as a side note, when Jesus came on the scene and died for our sins, things changed drastically as far as how God interacted with us and our communication with God. Because when Jesus died and raised to life, all of a sudden you and I have something that they didn't have in the old covenant. We have direct access to God through Jesus Christ. What that means is when you and I want to have a message or we want to talk to our Creator, all we have to do, we don't have to go through a priest, we don't have to go through a pastor. All you and I have to do is say, Lord, and all of a sudden we are having a conversation with God. 1 Timothy 2:5 says, there is one mediator between us and God. It is the man Jesus Christ. It wasn't always that way. For thousands of years, when God wanted to communicate to his people, he communicated through key leaders that he would raise up. Abraham was kind of the first of those guys. By the way, do you know the Bible says that Abraham was so close to God? Like he was closer to God. He had a relationship that God describes as a BFF relationship with him. And he was so close to God. Scripture says there's no other human before him and no other human on planet Earth this side of heaven after him that would have that kind of a relationship with God. Exactly. James 2:23 says this, Abraham believed God, it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. No other person in all of history was described as having that kind of an intimate side-by-side buddy, BFF relationship with God. No one. Not David, not Moses, not Pastor Stephen. Nobody had that kind of a relationship with God, which is why it kind of frustrates me the way I hear some people talk so flippantly about their relationship with God sometimes. In this generation, they'll say things like, yeah, God's my pal, he's my buddy, he's my chum, he's the man upstairs, he's my posse, he's my homeboy. No, he is not. One person in all of history, God went out of his way to say, that is my friend. One person says that's the kind of relationship we have with God the Father. Think about that, because by the way, there is this song that was popular for a lot of years, and it's not as popular now. We don't hear it as often, but it was on the radio and Christian radios, and we were singing it in churches. And it's the song, probably of all the Christian songs out there, that annoys me the most. And maybe you've heard it. It's called I Am a Friend of God. Right? Have you ever heard that? I am a friend of God. He calls me friend. No, you are not. Like, think about it. One person in all of history, God said, I have that relationship with you. That song annoys me so much. At the previous church I was at, we did a series that I designed called 2020 Vision. And it was based on this passage of Scripture. Exodus 20:20 says, do not be afraid, fear God, which sounds like a weird dichotomy, right? Like, don't be afraid, but be afraid. But here's kind of what it's getting at. If you have a proper reverence and respect and fear of God, you have nothing else in the world you need to fear. Do not be afraid, fear God. And so we handed out wristbands and we did this series. And in the middle of the series, I did a sermon on what it means from Scripture to actually fear God. And at the end of the sermon, my closing illustration was to make fun of this Christian song. And so I did. I was making fun of it and saying like how awful it was, how much I hate it, just like I'm doing right now. And then, I said a prayer and the sermon was over and I sat back down and we had an invitation and the band got up on the stage. Do you know what song the band had chosen that day as their closing song? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It was so awkward. But think about it, friends. Listen to this. This is what it says in James 23, that this closeness with God, right? This BFF status that Abraham had took root, from James 2:23, took root when Abraham believed something that God had said. Abraham believed God. It was credited to him as righteousness, and he was therefore called God's friend. So my question is this: what did God tell Abraham that was so unbelievable that when Abraham actually believed it, God was like, you're my new best friend? Like, what was it that God said that he believed? I'm so glad you asked. And if you have your Bibles, turn to them to Genesis chapter 12, starting at verse 1. Genesis chapter 12. Here we go. I love this. The Lord said to Abraham, remember that communication that Abraham, those leaders, God communicated through his people? The Lord said to Abraham, here's what he said. Abraham wakes up one morning, wipes the sleep out of his eye. God says, I've got something to tell you, Abe. And Abe said, okay, lay it on me, God. Here's what he says. Here's what I want you to do today. Abraham, I want you to leave your country, leave your people, leave your house, and I want you to go to a land that I will show you, when you get there. Good morning. Now go tell your wife. Like, that was kind of what God did that morning to Abraham. And Abraham's like, whoa. And by the way, I can promise you that if I were to wake up one morning and I were to walk into our bedroom and say, sweetheart, it's time to get up. Okay, and I want you to get your bag packed. Get my bag packed? What do you mean get my bag packed? Well, the kids, they're already packed and they're in the... Packed for what? Don't worry about it, just pack. Well, what do you want me to pack? Everything. What do you mean pack everything? Where are we going? I don't know, but I'll tell you when I get there. If I were to do that to Emily, I can promise you, she would not believe me. It would not be credited to me as righteousness, and I would not be her friend, all right? But that's kind of what God said to Abraham. But he wasn't done there. He said there's a reason for it. Look at verse 2. He says, Abraham, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. By the way, remember growing up, maybe in Sunday school, that song that you used to sing? Father Abraham had many sons, remember that song? By the way, I just sang to you twice already in the sermon. You are blessed by God. Well, that was about that blessing. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to make you into a great nation. And then he says this, look, he says, I will make your name great. By the way, that idea, I will make your name great, is something that I don't think we understand very well in our culture. Because it really doesn't matter that much to us. Like you and I, what we generally want to do in our culture is we want to kind of be happy. We want our kids to be safe. We want to make a little money, take nice vacations. We're not obsessed with our name being great, but back then, for a Hebrew man, that was like everything to them. They could handle adversity. They could take tragedy, any of that stuff, as long as there was honor attached to their name. And God says, Abraham, man, there's going to be so much honor attached to your name, a greater honor with your name than anyone in history. And he goes on, verse 3, he says, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. Wouldn't you love to have that superpower, by the way? Especially in traffic. Like, and you hear Pastor Jeff, he's not here so we can talk about him. You know his number one pet peeve in traffic, right? He talks about it all the time on stage. in this area in Northern Virginia, he'll be sitting at a light and it'll turn green and he's got his head down doing something. And you've heard him talk about this, right? And within a half a second, the person behind him lays on the horn. And Jeff's talking about, man, how that just annoys him. It's like people are so impatient. You know what? That doesn't annoy me at all. You know why? Because I realize in that moment, I'm in control of the situation. And so what I like to do when that happens is I like to just sit there and meditate on the situation a little while longer, which usually means that the person behind me starts teaching me some sign language lessons, right? But how awesome would it be that if they start cursing me like that and the things are flying and you can see their lips moving, that God would cause all kinds of horrible things to happen to them? Wouldn't that be awesome? I told you, Jeff is the spiritual pastor. I am not. I've warned you about that before. But he doesn't stop there. Listen to what he says. And if you have your pens and you have a paper Bible with you, you can circle this next verse. It says, and all people on earth will be blessed through you. In other words, this promise I'm giving you, Abraham, it's not just for you. It's going to extend farther than you can imagine. Friend, the reason why I want you to highlight that and underline that is because that promise extends all the way to you and extends to me. And so that was his message to Abraham. In other words, God says to Abraham, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is I'm going to make your name great. You're going to be a blessing. The whole world is going to feel the impact of your life, Abraham. The bad news, you got to get up now, pack your bags, and go tell your wife. Here's what Abraham does. Remember we said in James 2:23 that there was something that Abraham believed that was so impressive to God. God said, you are my friend. Abraham packs their bags and he goes. He goes. By the way, you've probably noticed in your Bible, if you've been following along, that at this point, Abraham's still going by his old name, right? At this point, his name is still Abram, which the name Abram literally means exalted father, which I've been trying to get my kids to talk to me like exalted papa, but it's not quite caught on. I think it has a nice ring. You might want to try exalted pastor if you're looking for a good title, but that's a different story. But did you know that back then names actually meant something? So back then when they named their kid something because that name was prophetic. It had meaning. It was what they wanted their kid to be. Today we don't do that. Today what you and I do as parents is we try to name our kids names that are cosmetic, right? Like parents today are obsessed with they've got to find a name that nobody else has. So it's not prophetic and it's not cosmetic. It usually ends up being pathetic, which is why when I hang out with my kids at school, this is what happens. Like I hang out with Soleil, right? And we'll sit there at the cafeteria table. I'll have to go and eat with my kids and they'll be all lined up. And Soleil will start introducing me to her friends, right? Hi, Papa, this is Jessaroni, and this is Maplika. And I'm sitting there going, what? It's taking everything inside of me not to poke fun at these poor innocent kids because we're ruining their lives. But you know what? Back then, names were cosmetic. They were prophetic. They meant something. And so in Genesis chapter 17, God says, you're no longer Abram. Your name is now Abraham, which means father of many nations. And so God says, Abraham, you get a new name. You get a new identity, you get a new place to live. But here's what I want you to do today. I want to look at the text again, but a little bit closer this time. Because, and I teach this in my dive class, by the way, Dive into the Bible, and if you ever have the opportunity to take that class, please do. Anytime the Hebrew author uses repetition, it's their way of saying this is the point of the story. It's their literary device to say, okay, in case you didn't get it, guys, this is what I mean. This is the point of the story. And if you're a parent, by the way, you already know this, right? We do this with our kids. By the way, in our house, Mackenzie, money. It's like a quarter. It's pretty sweet. Where were we? I don't care about the sermon, I'm rich. Mackenzie. So Mackenzie is the one in our house that we actually have to do the most repetition with, right? We have to say things over and over again to this kid. And if you've watched her, you know. We just have to, and it's the dumbest things that we have to repeat. Like the other day, she's in her high chair, and I had to say to her 3 times, sweetheart, don't pick your nose with your dinner fork. You would think once would be enough for that, right? No, not with Mac. Here's another one. This I know doesn't belong in a sermon, but that's okay, I'm cool with it. I've had to, on multiple occasions, say to Mackenzie when I've opened the bathroom door, sweetheart. You do not stand up on the toilet to poop. Like, I've had to say that to her on more than one occasion. You think it's funny? Next time you come over and you clean up the mess. We've had to tell, here's one for you, by the way, and we're kind of setting a record. I'm setting a record at Piney Branch Elementary School for the parent who has to come into the school to retrieve their kid the most. It's like, last year was like once every couple weeks I had to go in there and take her out of school for something. And so I've had to repeat things to her like this. Last year I got a call from her teacher. Okay, hey, Mr. Rancourt, I need you to come in and get Mackenzie. Well, why? What's wrong? What happened? Well, it's not an emergency, Mr. Rancourt. Come in and just please, when you come, bring a change of clothing. Okay, so I go home and I get the change of clothing. I run to the school and I walk into the classroom and there she is and she's soaking wet. Like, why are you so, like, it looked like she would jumped in a tub with her clothes. I'm like, why is she soaking wet? And see, the kindergarten classrooms, they have a bathroom between two classrooms. And so they can go in there during the day. They don't have to go down the hallway. And so Mac had apparently got up from her desk and went into the bathroom. And she was in there for like 15 minutes. Now, if you're a teacher and you don't look for or at Mackenzie for a period of 15 minutes, this one is on you, in my opinion, right? So no kidding. So I'm like, well, what happened? What happened? And here's what happened. Mac had gone into the bathroom and she had taken fistfuls of paper towel and she plugged the sink and she plugged the drain on the floor and then she turned on the faucets. She flooded the school bathroom. When they finally walked in there and opened the door, she was making water angels in the bathroom. So I've had to sit Mackenzie down and say, sweetheart, you don't make water angels in school. Who has to repeat that to their kids? Oh my God. And while I'm telling stories, about a week and a half ago, there's this thing I have to tell Lily and Mackenzie all the time because when it's cold and they're running the bus stop, they want to put their hands in their pocket. I have to tell them, you don't put your hands in your pocket when you're running because if you trip, there's no way to break your fall. You're going to hit your face. You're going to get hurt, right? But sure enough, like last week, it was like a week and a half ago maybe, they're on the way to the bus stop. Mac's got her hands, and Lily's got her hands in her pocket, and Mac trips up, and all I see on the last second is her head crashing to the concrete ground and bouncing off it, right? It was awesome, I know, like to you out there. And all of a sudden, she's lying on the sidewalk, and there's a welt on her head, and blood's gushing down. And so I do what any loving, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding love parent does. I walk over there, and I grab her up, and I dust her off, and I look at her, I'm like, I'm so glad this happened to you. Exact quote, by the way. And I say, because you got, by the way, parents, don't you love when the consequence is inherent in the crime? And you don't have to add a consequence because they're already hurting bad enough. So I dust her off, I'm like, I said again, I'm so glad this happened to you. You're going on the, and I put her on the bus, right? I knew this was going to happen. 15 minutes later, the school nurse calls. And so I pick up the phone, Mr. Rancourt? Yes, Mr. And by the way, Mac, anytime she gets in here, you know she's going to play it up. That's what she does, right? Attention. So, Mr. Rancourt, it's not an emergency, Mr. Rancourt. I got Mac in the office here with me, and she's got a big, and she's bleeding. Well, yes, I know. She said you were happy this happened. How do you explain that one to the school officials, right? Oh, well. Verse 2 and 3 and 4, if you have your Bibles. Repetition, what stands out? You can underline it. Look at this. Abraham, I will make you into a nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. In case you didn't get it, Abraham, I am the God who will. I'm the God who will. And not only there, if you read in Genesis 13 and chapter 15 and 17 and 22, God once again repeats that promise. Abraham, I am the God who will. It's as if he's saying, Abraham, I know what I'm asking of you is not easy. In this culture, surrendering your life to me and just getting up and doing what I ask is not going to be comfortable, and people won't understand it, and your family might not want it. But I'm telling you, Abraham, when I promise I'm going to come through, Abraham, I will. Because when I say I will, man, you can take that to the bank. And I think, by the way, there's a lesson here for you and I in this. Because if we're honest, let me adjust this. Move around too much. You and I have been the victim of broken promises. right? And at times, if you're honest, they've ripped your heart out. They've caused you to lose faith in people. And if you're honest, probably your biggest wounds on planet Earth were from broken promises. Some of you remember what it's like to stand on a stage years ago, just like this one. And one of you were wearing a long white dress with a veil, and the other was wearing a suit or a tuxedo. And you stood on that stage, and vows were made. There were promises exchanged. Genesis 12, you guys said, I will. Through sickness and health, and richer and poorer, till death do you part, I will. But no one died. But yet somewhere along the line, that vow was broken. The promise was broken, and maybe you've carved out a new life for yourself, and maybe, you've made some decisions and things are going okay in your life, and I'm celebrating that with you, but you cannot deny that there was wreckage and the pain and the consequences that you went through going through that, and sometimes even experience now, because broken promises leave wreckage. Some of you probably grew up in a house where your dad was the king of I wills. Every day, yeah, I will, I'll go to that game with you. Yeah, I will. I promise when work slows down, we'll take that trip together. Yeah, I promise I'll come to your performance. I will. But most of those promises ended up broken. There's a song, by the way, I can't listen to because when I listen to it, I just break down. It's so emotional. Actually, it's probably not saying that much because like a week ago, I was doing some cleaning in the house, scrubbing the floors, and I had the TV on to the 90s channel, listening to the music because it's the greatest generation of all. And so I'm scrubbing the floors, and this song comes on by Wilson Phillips, 1990, Release Me, right? And I just started bawling when it came on. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like crying all over my floor. I'm like, what's going on here? Well, see, in 1990, I was dating this girl. It was a really long, intense relationship. We were dating for about 3 days, and I wanted to find a way to break up with her. And so here's what I did. I took a cassette and I recorded the song and I gave that Release Me song to break up with her. Dudes, you gotta be creative. You leave an impact, right? So when I wasn't crying because now I'm looking back and think, I made the wrong decision. Why did I do that? No, it was like, I think it just hit me, but man, time goes by so fast, right? It goes by so fast, and so I was just having a moment. Well, there's this other song that crushes me every time I hear it. It's an older song by Harry Chapin. And it's a song about broken promises. How many people have heard of The Cats in the Cradle? Remember that song? A child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. He was talking before I knew it, and as he grew, he said, I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you. And the cat's in the cradle, and the silver spoon, little boy blue, and the man on the moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, promises. You know we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, well, not today. Promise broken. I got a lot to do, he said, but that's okay. As he walked away, his smile never dimmed, and he said, I'm going to be like him. Yeah, I'm going to be like him. You know, the cat's in the cradle, right? So on. And then the song takes a dramatic turn. When he came home from college just the other day, he looked so much like a man, I just had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while? He shook his head and said with a smile, what I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later. Can I have them, please? And the cat's in the cradle, right? The silver spoon. And the final stanza. I've long since retired and my son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you, if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time, but you see, my new job's a hassle, the kids have the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been real great talking to you. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, my boy was just like me. He'd grown up just like me. Probably the most devastating consequence of broken promises is that we're raising kids who break their promises, and we're raising an entire generation that doesn't know how to keep their I wills. Did you know if you are a kid who grows up in a home where your parents have been divorced, statistics say if that I will is broken and that kid knows it and they see it and they experience it, that child is 70% more likely in their life to have a divorce. Think about that. By the way, we had a church event a few weeks ago, Fun on Purpose. Remember the ice skating event at the Harris Pavilion? We all went down there and fumbled across the ice. It was a tremendous blast. And by the way, probably the best part of that ice skating event was watching Pastor Jeff. Like hang on to the boards with a death grip. He wouldn't let go. And he was kind of making his way around the ice like this. And Eliana was in the middle of the ice. For those of you there, remember, she's like, come on, Dad. Come out in the middle, it's fine. He's like, no, I'm staying right here, right? Which makes me think the next time he stands up in front of you as a church and asks you as a congregation to take a significant risk, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to point back to that event for him when he demonstrated risk-taking so wonderfully for you on the ice, right? I mean, take the risk. He's a good leader, all right? Just heckle him a little bit for me, all right? But man, that ice skating event was right there, and they announced it in the church. And so Dryden, she made me make her a promise when she heard about the event, because she said, Papa, please, promise me you'll take me skating before we go as a church, because I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of my friends, right? So I said, sure, I will, right? Genesis chapter 12, I will. I made a promise to her. Here's kind of what went down. Like all of us have had happen, things came up. New Year's, NFL playoffs, right? We had the big storm. So all these things hit, and all of a sudden it was Thursday morning, and it was like 3 days before the event, and I woke up in the morning and it just hit me like, oh my goodness, I have not kept my word. And I couldn't believe it, so here's what I did. I did the only reasonable thing a parent would do. I kidnapped them from school that day. I called up the school that morning, and I said, the person answered the phone, yes, who's it? Mr. Rankle, okay. Hey, I said, I need my kids, Dryden and Soleil, please, at 1 o'clock in the office for early dismissal. Okay, Mr. Rancourt, well, what's going on? Well, they have an appointment. Well, Mr. Rancourt, what kind? Just get my kids at 1 o'clock, please, and quit poking your nose. It's an emergency, right? And so, by the way, this wasn't the first time this happened. In the fall, I called the school and I said, I need my kids at 10 o'clock in the morning. In the same kind of a deal, right? And I went in there and the Duck Donuts, remember, had opened. Right, so unbelievable. And so I'm like, I want them to go to Duck Donuts. So I went to the school and I picked them up and we drove, and they thought they had a dentist appointment, right? And I parked right in front of the dentist, and they're groaning, Papa, take us back to school. Please, we don't want to go in there. Like, oh, this is awful. We get out and we take a sharp right and we walk all the way around to the other side of the parking lot and we walk into Duck Donuts. You should have seen their eyes. Like, whoa, I thought we were going to the dentist. I said, who said anything about a dentist appointment? This is a donut appointment, right? Like, this is awesome. And then I took them back to school. But so this is the second time. This is becoming a trend. And so I took them out of school that day, showed up at 1 o'clock. By the way, they're never going to believe it when I tell them we're actually going to the doctors. I've kind of ruined that. But so I picked them up in the school, and we're driving right towards where their doctor is. I drive right past it. We parked the car in the Haymarket ice rink parking lot. Whoa, the look on their eyes, because their Papa said, I will. And he did. There's power in keeping our I wills. And in Genesis chapter 12, God goes out of his way to say, Abraham, I will, I will, I will. And when I say I will, Abraham, you can count on it, Abraham. Literally, friends, even if it costs me the life of my own son, and you know that's exactly what it did cost. Do you realize that? The moment God woke up Abraham that day and whispered into his ears, Abraham, I will make your name great. I will make you into a blessing. Abraham, the whole earth will be blessed through you. The moment God said, I will, the nail was already in Jesus' hands. Because when God says, I will, he will. You know, there's not a lot of guarantees in our life. There's no guarantee that you're going to have money, that the bills will be paid, that you're going to be healthy. There's no guarantee that the people that you pour love into will love you back. It may happen to be the opposite for you. Your wife may leave you. Your boss may fire you. People may resent you. But your God, who says, I will, always will. One last story this morning. In 1998, it's a long time ago, I was a student at Kentucky Christian University, and my preaching professor, Dr. Peter Vercruyze, came to me one day and said, hey, I want to take you to the National Preaching Summit in Indianapolis, Indiana. And it's going to be at the Adams Mark Hotel. And do you want to go? And I said, oh, yes, absolutely. And so we went to this conference, and what it was is there were 400 preachers from all over the country who were gathered in that hotel, and we got to sit for 2 days and just listen to some of the best teaching of the Word from some of the greatest preachers and teachers in all the country. And it was awesome. All day Friday, all day Saturday, I just sat there soaking everything up like a sponge, writing down every last word I could. And Friday night came, and I had dinner, and then I wanted to be fresh the next day, and so I went straight to bed. Got in bed because I wanted to be able to have an alert mind. And so as my head hits the pillow, before I can fall asleep, and you've had this happen, this annoying thought pops into my head, right? And I can't sleep because I've got this mind that's working in overdrive. Here was the thought that popped into my head. There are 400 preachers in this hotel. They're all going to have come and gone, and not one single person are going to hear about Jesus. We're just going to kind of keep to ourselves. And I'm laying there in my bed. I'm trying to sleep. I'm trying to silence a thought, but it won't go away. There are 400 preachers in this hotel, and they're all going to have come and gone, and not one single person is going to hear about Jesus over and over. I can't get it out of my head. So here's what I did. I got up out of bed. I put my clothes on. I walked down the hallway. I grabbed a notepad and a pen, and I went down to the lobby, and I started walking around. And it was really kind of neat because I walked right by the hotel bar, and they were playing a song that just happened to be the theme song from my high school prom. Oh, what a night, late December, back it's, you are blessed. I am singing again, right? So I walk into the bar, and I stand at the back, and I'm kind of bebopping a little bit to the music, right? I get in there, and then there's a table in the back of the bar, so I sat down, and I took my notepad, and I wrote down the thought that I'd had. There are 400 preachers in this hotel. They're all going to have come and gone, and no one is going to hear about Jesus. And then I wrote these words, please, whatever, God, do not let that happen. Find me someone to talk to about Jesus. And when I lifted up my head, I looked over at the bar area, and there was one guy sitting on a bar stool with an empty stool beside him, so I said, okay. So I got up, and I went over, and I sat down on the stool, and I started talking to him. And it turns out he was a priest. He was traveling through to see friends or family or something like that, and so we talked a little bit about our lives and what we were doing, and then about a half hour or so later, he got up and left. And while I was writing down that conversation, somebody else came in, and he sat down right beside my stool. And we started talking. He was a sports nut, right? He was a fanatic. So he got up on the stool, and he started about sports, and I told him why I was there. And he didn't really want to hear about God, so he kept putting the conversation back to sports. And a half hour later, he got up, and he left. And so I was in there, having myself a moment after he left, just writing everything down that he had said. So excited, man. These were the front lines of ministry, right? I'm writing this stuff down, just staring at the words, when all of a sudden, a hand comes crashing on my shoulder from behind me, and a voice yells at the top of his lungs, "What in the hell are you doing in this place?" Like, after I went to my room to change my shorts, I came back. No, I didn't. But I'm like, whoa, and everyone in the bar turned, and they were staring. And so slowly I turn and I look around, and there's this guy standing beside me whom I do not know. He's wearing jeans and a wife beater, and he's got the white tank tops, that's what they call them. Anyways, he's got that on, he's got scraggly hair, he's got a 3-day beard, and he's standing there right beside me, and he looks at me and he says, "You're a Christian. What are you doing in this place?" And everybody's staring, right? I start to sweat, like I'm all nervous, like what am I going to do? And I'm like, God, give me something. And all of a sudden I remembered my notepad. So I took out my notepad and I said, look at this. And I want to read this to you. It says, there are 400 preachers in this hotel. They're all going to have come and gone without anyone hearing about Jesus. Please don't let that happen. Send me someone to tell about Jesus. And I looked at him and I said, I think that's you. Will you sit down? He sat down. I said, what's your name? He said, my name's Brandon. His name was Brandon Xavier Elliott. I said, Brandon, what are you doing in the hotel bar tonight? He said, well, I know the bar manager, and he gets me free drinks, so I come in here every night at this time. I said, well, that's all fine and dandy, but what happened in your life where you got to the point where you need to come in here every night of your life to make your problems go away? And that's when he told his story. And his story started out a lot like maybe some of your story. He grew up, and his parents went to church. He grew up in Sunday school, learned all the Bible stories. Went to youth group when he was older. He was in high school. He met a girl, started dating her, went off to college. They went to the same college. He graduated from college, married his high school sweetheart, got a job making 6 figures right out of college. He was able to buy a house, and so their life was going A-okay, right? So he decided, we're going to give back to the world. And so they started volunteering in the Sunday school and volunteering with the youth group, right? Everything in his life was going perfectly the way he designed it until one day he woke up, went to work, had a massive headache at work. massive headache. So I'm going home. So he went home in the middle of the day, walked into his house, went into the bedroom. When he walked into the bedroom, his wife was in bed with the pastor of the church. He went over and he grabbed the pastor and beat him to a pulp in anger, broke his jaw, broke his nose. He said, and that day is the day I started drinking. He said, I just drink at night. I started drinking all day, every day, doing drugs, and I would sleep with as many girls as would sleep with me. He said, for an entire year, that's all I did. My life got so out of control. He said, so out of control, I lost my job. I lost everything. And all I could see was the trail of wreckage of broken promises in this guy's life. And he said he woke up one day, and he just all of a sudden, it was like looking in the mirror. He looked at his life and he said, it can't go on. I'm one decision away from taking a bottle of pills and ending this. I can't do this. And he said, I made the toughest decision I've ever made in my life. I said, I'm going back to church. So he got dressed and he went and he walked into the back of the same church that he went to all those years growing up. There's a new pastor there. He walked in. He said when he walked in, a few people looked over and they recognized him, and they kind of did those half waves and small smiles, but it was uncomfortable because they knew the kind of things he had been doing. They knew they beat up his old pastor, all those things. So they were just a little bit suspicious. He sat through the whole worship service, and the message, at the end of the message, the new pastor offered an invitation, said, hey, if anyone here has a decision to make, I want you to come up now and tell us what that decision is. He said he mustered up all the strength in his legs that he could, and he stood up and started walking to the front. He could see, he said, I could feel the eyes of everyone staring at me. He said he walked to the front, he took the microphone, and he told everyone everything he had been doing that year. The drinking, the drugs, the sex. He confessed everything. He's standing at the front, and the pastor of the church knew it was a weird situation, and there were still ties to the old pastor, all that kind of stuff. And so the pastor said these words to him. Thank you, Brandon. The elders and I are going to meet after this service, and we'll decide whether or not this is the place for you to worship, or we need to find someplace else for you. Brandon said that day he dropped the microphone on the ground. He walked out of the church, and he said, I'll never go back and set my foot in a church again. And I remember looking at him. And the trail of broken promises, right? And I remember saying to him, and the final one, the straw that broke the camel's back, was that a church that was supposed to promise grace and love and hope and renewal did not extend that to him. And I looked at him, I said, Brandon, it doesn't have to be that way. Not all churches are like this, because you serve a God, Brandon, you serve a God that when he says, I will, I will. I don't care what you've done. Those sins are as far as the east is from the west. I've given you my son, Brandon. I will. And just around that point in the night, a girl came in that was supposed to meet him up. I think they were going to get a room together or something, and she kept nagging for him to leave, and so finally he got up and he left. And before he left, he turned and he looked at me and said one last thing. He looked at me, and probably the deepest part of an eye, the eyes you can look at someone, he said, listen, Jacques, I know I'm going to die a lonely man. And he walked out of the bar. I know there are people here in this room that if you were honest, maybe you're in your marriage, maybe you've got people around you at work all the time, but man, you're lonely and you're depressed and you're angry, and there's stuff that's hidden that no one knows about, and it's eating at you and it's gnawing at you, and there's been broken promises along the way. And you're dying inside, and you're sitting here and you sing the songs and you pay attention to the message and you laugh at the jokes and all that kind of thing. But deep down inside, there is a loneliness that you need to take care of. And the good news is this: I don't care what you've done. I don't care what the sin is. I don't care how much sin you've accumulated. I don't care what the pain and the wreckage is. You serve a God that will keep his promises. And if you have the courage to surrender to that God today, that God will. Even though it costed him his son, he will.